Hello, welcome to TheShailyShow. I'm Shailendra, and you're watching this simulcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Hope you're safe and maintaining social distancing. For you to view this episode and other sessions that I run on emerging technologies live, I would request you to follow me so that you can be alerted when a live session is on. This gives you an opportunity to directly ask the questions from our guests, so please press the follow button on LinkedIn, Twitter, and subscribe button on YouTube. Okay, now a bit of a story. More than 2 decades ago, when I started my career, we were given access to some slides by my then manager, Rohini Kapadat, and I heard the term data warehouse for the first time. I starkly remember 2 slides which were said to be the foundation of our work and for us to remember by heart. It said, BIll Inmon, the father of DataWarehouse, defines a subject-oriented, non-volatile, integrated, time-variant collection of data in support of management decisions. And then we learned the concepts like 3NF, top-down approach, CIF, star schema, snowflake schema, and so forth. We learned the definition by heart to the extent that I still remember it till date. And I can explain in great details all the concepts, some of the concepts though. In fact, I have proposed and delivered the top-down approach in almost every organization I've worked by building data marts. So imagine the influence that particular slide and that particular individual has on my career in life. Very little did I know at that time that one day I'll be in the same room, virtual room, with a person from whom we learned so much. And I think many of us built our careers and also delivered many success stories. So, without any further ado, let me invite BIll Inmon, the father of DataWarehouse, to the show. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Shailendra, how you doing?
Very good. Welcome to the Shaily Show.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'm so just excited and happy to have you on the show. It's like a dream come true.
I'm honored.
As I was just telling to people about how I've grown in life, by the first slide that came to me was written about you. And I've now lived 26, 27 years of my career here. Anyways, so should we start from the start? Tell us about how it all started. How did you get the idea of data warehouse? How did it come to your mind? How did it all start?
Well, many years ago, I was working in IT, and at that time, everybody was building online transaction processing systems. And OLTP was what people were doing. And there's nothing wrong with OLTP, but when you are in an OLTP environment, you think that's all there is. And as I got to thinking about the OLTP environment, I realized that there was a lot of other things that needed to be done and should be done that wasn't OLTP. And that was really the origins of data warehouse. I started thinking about, if everything isn't transaction processing, what else do we have databases for? And then one thing led to another, and I started to write papers and speak at conferences about data warehouse. It didn't happen all at once. It really kind of happened a step at a time. And one day I wrote a book on data warehouse, and that book went around the world.
Well, you mentioned OLTP, and I remember we used to talk about OLTP and OLAP, and that's where it all started, beginning where people started building cubes and whatnot.
Yep.
Tell us more about that. Very interesting.
Well, when you're in the world of OLTP, everything focuses around transaction response time. Yep. And there's nothing wrong. We need good transaction response time, but there are a lot of decisions that need to be made that are not transaction-based response time, that don't need to be made in 2 to 3 seconds time. And that led to the notion, well, if we have other kinds of data, what other kinds of data? One of the other things that was a fault of transaction processing systems was the fact that in transaction processing systems, you normally want to get rid of as much data as you can. You don't want to have 4 or 5 years worth of data because that slows your system up. And so you are all the time getting rid of data in transaction processing systems. The problem is that historical data has got a lot of value. That being able to look back 5 and 10 years time for some people making certain decisions, that's very important data and information. And so the notion that we needed to have historical data. The other thing that was wrong with transaction processing systems was the fact that typically an organization wouldn't have one transaction processing system; they'd have 10 or 15, and there was no integration among any of the transaction processing systems, and so the lack of integration, the inability to have historical data, the inability to support very large transactions, those were some of the limitations of transaction processing systems.
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And with the OLAP, when we started talking about OLAP, it was, we needed to look back, but we didn't want the most recent transaction to be today. We can live with a day ago's data and so forth. So
Yep.
it's about looking at the history in the right sense, which should not be moving that quickly, so that you can make some decision out of it.
That's correct. And there is that aspect as well. So there was this other whole world that was out there, and the people that were running the IT department only thought there was transaction processing. So when data warehouse came along, it was very threatening to people because it was things that they had never thought about and never thought about.
I've got some stories around that, and we can share while we're talking. Anyways, the second question, whenever you do something new, innovative, it's not that easy. There are lots of challenges around that, right? Of course. So, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, there is a famous book that doesn't have anything to do with technology, but it's called Who Moved My Cheese? And the book, Who Moved My Cheese, are about some mice that every day get cheese delivered to a certain place. And one day, for whatever reason, somebody moves the cheese elsewhere. And this really upsets the mice. Not that they don't have cheese, but that somebody moved it. And so you're absolutely right. People have this mindset, and they don't like for people to come along and change their what they think they know, and it's very threatening to them. When I first started Data Warehouse, I was a very unpopular person. I got letters from people saying, and I even have a collection of these letters. But one person said I should never be allowed to speak in public, that I was an anarchist, that I was setting the industry back 25 years, that I got all kinds of things that were simply not true, but that's what I had to go through in the early days.
Well, in my book, I've mentioned there are things we know we don't know, and there are things we don't know we don't know. And I think to what you've set up people for, it was about finding out things they didn't know they didn't know.
Absolutely, and IT management was so locked in to thinking about transaction processing systems that they did not have an open mind at all.
Yep, and I can imagine that. I've I've been there, done that. There was a time when I was told that that rogue Shalindra sitting in a corner is telling us stuff which we think is incorrect. Of
Yes.
course. But when you come with some good supporting information, they can't take you that far. Anyways, um, must tell you there are more than 30 people watching us at the moment live.
Okay.
Guys, thank you for watching. I must say one thing. If you've got any question, this is your time to write the question for Bill, and I will take it up for sure. Across all the platforms. And also, if you want someone else to hear from, please mention their name. Next question. Data warehouses, are they still relevant in the current day and age when we talk about big data? Or is this just the same thing with a different name, which I sometimes say? But, anyways, and any examples you can share?
Well, yeah. Let me talk about that. Big data is a technology. Data warehouse is an architecture, and there's a fundamental difference between a technology and an architecture. Consider this: we need craftsmen, people that hammer and saw and lay concrete. We need those people to build things, but we need another kind of person to architect things. You don't want somebody that is a carpenter building a bridge, because the bridge may fall down in the middle of the river. You want an architect to determine the strength of the bridge, the shape of the bridge, and what it can do. And so there's this fundamental difference between a technology and an architecture. And the truth is, data warehouse is an architecture. Big data is a technology, and they are fundamentally different from each other. We need both of them. Uh, these people that were in the world of big data that came along and said, oh my gosh, now that we've got big data, we don't need a data warehouse, simply goes to show what they understood about architecture, which was not very much. And no, we now when you have big data, or when you have data warehouse, one of the uh, features of a data warehouse is the need to manage a lot of data. And for that purpose, big data actually does a very good job. The problem is that there's so many other things. The vetting of the data, the integration of the data, the metadata that's needed, all of those, and there are many other facets to a data warehouse that are not necessarily part of big data. So and I blame the vendors of big data when big data came about. The vendors of big data tried to tell people, now that we have big data, you don't need a data warehouse. And that simply wasn't true then. It's not true now, and it's not going to be true tomorrow.
Okay. Guys, I have got lots of people watching. Guys, if you've got a question, please mark them. And also, I would like to know if any challenges that you're facing while you're doing any data warehouse work, please share it with us and we will discuss that as well. Data lakes. So the terminology is changing from data warehouse, big data, and data lake. Let's talk about data lakes now. How is it different? And what is the difference between data warehouse and data lake? And any success stories that you can share with us around that?
Well, you may not like what I'm about to say, but again, you asked the question, so I'll answer it as honestly as I can. when people came across big data and the vendors of big data and the Silicon Valley investors in big data came along, they first tried to get rid of data warehouse, and that didn't succeed for good reason. Then they said, well, we need to do something. And I don't know what architect they got to tell them about data lakes, but data lakes was simply a very bad idea. That they said, we'll just take the data, throw it over into a data lake, and then let go people find it. Well, this is. I even wrote a book on taking data lakes and adding the infrastructure that you need. You need to have structure. You need to have infrastructure. You need to have information about what text is there. If you just take data and throw it into a data lake, it's going to rot. Nobody's going to be able to find anything. Nobody's going to be able to use it. Your data lake is going to turn into very quickly a data swamp, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So like I said, one of my latest books was on data lake, talking about the infrastructure that can be created when you build a data lake. So that is the unfortunate truth as I see it about data lakes.
So, what do you think? Will there be more data lake stories coming in the future, or people will get back to the data warehousing scenario and start doing data warehousing again?
They never stopped doing data
Yeah.
warehouse,
Yep.
so it wasn't they start doing it. Again, you need your. Let me tell you when you need a data warehouse. You need a data warehouse when you get audited. When the government comes and says, how much tax do you owe us, and can you prove it in taxing? That's when you need a data warehouse, because you've got to have data that is believable, useful data that can be defended. And as long as we have a need for integrated historical data, as long as our corporations are paying taxes, we're going to need a data warehouse. And then you say, well, gee, Bill, taxes have been around since the time of Julius Caesar for 5,000 years. And you're right. Death and taxes are the two things on this earth that everybody faces. And so as long as we're facing the need for credible integrated data, you're going to have a data warehouse.
One thing comes to mind. Do you have any stories around the unstructured and the semi-structured data coming into data warehouse? Because I don't think that was even thought of at the time when data warehouses were being created in early 90s.
Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but the last 15 years or so, I've been working on the problem of textual data and making a data warehouse out of textual data.
Okay,
And
we'll talk about that. I'll just pause you there. We'll talk about that. I think that's an interesting topic in itself. Okay, let's go. Let's talk about data warehouse clouds. So now we've moved on from. So I'm just clarifying these terminologies for the people because there are so many. Whether it is a data warehouse, whether it is a data warehouse lake, a data mart, and a data warehouse cloud. So data warehouse cloud. What's your point of view on it? Is
um,
moving too much of data difficult in with the network, or
I,
please?
I think that there is a bright future for data warehouse on the cloud. And there's actually several reasons for it. Number one reason, one of the reasons why I think data warehouse on the cloud is such a good idea is because it removes it from the hands of the IT organization. That you can now have an independent organization build and manage your data warehouse. And I think that that's a good thing to have happen because the track record of IT building and managing data warehouses has not been a very good track record. The second reason why I think data warehouse on the cloud is good. Actually, there's lots of reasons. A second reason is because of capacity. That for all practical purposes, the cloud has got an infinite amount of capacity, and that's good because data warehouses tend to attract lots and lots of data. But there's a third reason why I think data warehouse on the cloud is a good idea, and that's because of the economics of the situation. That in general, you are able to do whatever you want to do on the cloud and pay just for what you do. You see, when you try to build and manage your own data warehouse, you've got to pay for the entire infrastructure all the time, whether you're using it or not. But if you put your data warehouse on the cloud, you only have to pay for the resources that you actually use. So those are three actually really good reasons why I recommend people putting data warehouse on the cloud. One of my favorite companies is a company called Snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Snowflake does a very good job of doing data warehousing on the cloud.
Okay, so that is data warehouse cloud for us, and we certainly see benefits in there. And I will shamelessly say that SAP is also doing some great work in data warehouse here, data warehouse cloud here, and I think it'll be an interesting topic for us to discuss in another conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, more than 30 people watching us, guys. If you've got any question, please put them in the comment section, and I will definitely take that. This is your opportunity. You don't get Bill Inmon on his show answering live questions every day. This is a great opportunity for you to have. Okay, next question is around how you've seen it moving. So if you were to just sit back and look at from 300 feet above the ground and say, this is where it was, this is what I thought, this is where it was, this is where it is today, and this is where it is going to go. How have you, can you just put a broader picture around the whole data journey that is having at the moment?
Surely. Let me go back to the very beginning. It may surprise you to know how data warehouse got established. It was not the IT organization that established data warehouse. Data warehouse was around as a concept and as a concept, but nobody was doing much of anything with it. And then one day, the marketing departments of the world, in particular, the cell phone marketing organization. Once upon a time, cell phones were something that was new and people were fighting for market share. And one cell phone company discovered that they could go out and find and keep customers with a data warehouse. And then the next thing you know, word got through to the other cell phone companies, and the management of other cell phone companies went to their IT department and said, we're going to have a data warehouse. So it wasn't the IT organization that was leading the charge. It was the marketing organization and management telling IT, we're going to have a data warehouse. Then what happened was, in fairly short order, data warehouse spread from outside the world of cellular telephone into mainstream corporations, insurance companies, manufacturing organizations as well. But it was the marketing department that led the charge. I'll never forget, I first taught some courses on data warehouse. And in the very first days of data warehouse, everybody was from the marketing organization. And then one day, just for fun, I asked the question, okay, who here is from the IT department? And I was amazed that most of the people were from the IT department. And I knew that a change had occurred in that day and age. Well, then data warehouse sort of became something the IT department did. But it's been my experience that most IT departments did not do data warehouse very well. They would usually hire data warehousing out to a consulting organization, and then the consulting organization would come in and build and manage the data warehouse for them. Now we see that data warehouse moving to the cloud. It means that the IT department is getting further and further away from data warehousing, and the people that are actually paying for and using and managing data warehouse are the different functional organizations themselves. You see marketing, you see sales, you see finance, you see engineering. Those are the organizations that are leading the charge on the data warehouse today. So that's now, having stated that, there's some companies that what I've described is not true. So I'm not trying to slap anybody in the face. And there's some organizations that the progression that I've described is not true. There are some IT organizations that have been quite successful with data warehouse, but in general, the progression is as I've described.
Okay. As you've been looking at it for such a long time, any success stories that just, come out to you? I've got my own success stories, but I want to hear other success stories that you've seen around the world. If you want to name the organization, fine enough. If you don't want to, that's also fine. It's up to you. But, tell us a couple of success stories so people can learn from, and it can be from any industry you want.
Well, there's actually quite a few success stories. One of them that I think we're all familiar with is the airlines frequent flyer clubs. That the truth of the matter is the frequent flyer clubs that the airlines have is nothing but a data warehouse. That's what a data warehouse is. And if it weren't for data warehouse, we wouldn't be having frequent flyer clubs in the airlines. And so that's one a very obvious success story. But there's actually a lot of other success stories. Let me tell you an unsuccess story. And I don't mind naming the organization because it's simply true. In the early days of data warehouse, I was asked to speak to the CEO of a company called J.C. Penney. Now, at the time, J.C. Penney was one of the largest retailers in the United States. And so, and the person that invited me in, they said, Bill, whatever you do, don't talk about technology. Talk about business, because you're talking to a business person, not a technologist. So, and you also have half an hour of the CEO's time. So I said, okay. And so I talked about three things. I said, let me show you how to make more money. Let me show you how to find more customers. And let me show you how to reduce your expenses. And I talked to him about how data could be used to do that. I didn't talk about technology at all. At the end of my presentation, the CEO of JCPenney said, thank you, Bill, for your presentation. But you see, at JCPenney, those aren't the kind of things we're interested in. Now, what I said, well, we're talking about making money, having new customers, and reducing expenses. And so I came home to my wife and I said, do we own any stock in JCPenney? Because if we do, we want to sell it immediately. So I don't know if you've noticed, but JCPenney is filing for bankruptcy now. And with management like they had, I can certainly understand how that happened. So that's not a success story. That's an unsuccess story, but that's what happens when corporations don't pay attention to business.
No, I totally agree with you. In fact, all the time I go. So I think you know the. I don't think you should. You shouldn't know the name of my book, which I've written. It's called "Making Money Out of Data." That's what it does, and it has not even a one line of technicality in it. In fact, when I finished that book and sent it to a few people, a few of my colleagues, to say, "Can you just review it whether it makes sense?" They looked at it and said, "Well, but there's no technology in it." I said, "Well, it shouldn't be, because in my view, analytics is something to do with business,
Yes.
but not with technology." On the other hand, I used to always say, when I joined a couple of companies, they used to ask me, "What's your cost center?" And that's a very, very known term. And I said, "I don't have a cost center. I have a profit center, because I make money. I don't spend time in creating reports. I use data to make money." And that's where most of the time I have spent is with the business. And my conversations with business are very different to the conversation an IT guy would have with an IT guy. And that's what I've seen all my life. Every time I go in and have a conversation, the IT guys just disappear. And I can have a conversation with a business guy, a CMO or a CFO or a CPO in technology, or innovation officer, for a couple of hours, because that's what they want. They want to hear how to save money and how to get more money. And that's all about the book is also all about. Sorry for digressing. Okay.
I would like to read your book. You have me intrigued now, because how to make money with data is one of my favorite topics.
Okay, thank you. And you can find it on Amazon.
Okay.
And the link will be there. Okay. What is next in data warehouse space?
Well, I don't know how far you want me to go with this, but if you take a look at the data that's in the corporation today, if I were to hold in my hands the data in the corporation today like this, what you would find is that in today's world, we're only looking at a small fraction of the data that exists in the corporation today. The truth of the matter is that 80 to 90% of the data in the corporation today doesn't get looked at. And what data am I talking about? I'm talking about textual data. That when you look at the universe of data that's out there, we've only, in our industry, only looked at 5 or 10% of it. We think we've looked at a lot of it, and we do a good job of managing what we do. But looking at transactions and looking at business the way we do is only really a small fraction of what's going on in the corporation today. So when I look at the future, I look at the larger picture of all of the data in the corporation. And when you look at all of the data in the corporation, a whole new world opens up to you. It really and truly is the new frontier.
No, absolutely. And I think this calls for a greater discussion. So I request you, if you can make some time in a couple of weeks, if we can just spend some time only on the unstructured and the semi-structured data, if you've got time, and if you enjoyed the show and I didn't grill you too much.
First off, thank you for the invitation. I would love to do it. I've got some really good stories.
Okay.
I've got some stories that will. I tell you what, I've had people cry after hearing my stories, and when you hear some of them, you may want to cry as well.
Okay. So, guys, this is breaking news. We are in the world of breaking news these days. Bill Inmon is going to come back to the show for the second episode to talk unstructured data. So, Bill, 14th May is fine for you?
It's fine, absolutely.
Okay, so we will do that 2 weeks from now on 14th of May, live here again with Bill.
Okay.
So, thank you, Bill, for accepting that. Okay, Bill, we mentioned about a few success stories, few unsuccessful stories. Anything you want to state and say before we get on to the questions to the audience? And I've got a mix of IT people, business people, and also beginners. So if you could give your advice to them, how do they look at things and around data warehouse, it'll be great.
Well, I think looking at data warehouse on the cloud is a very good thing to do. If I were in business today, that's what I would be doing. I think the fact that different organizations are letting the functional organization, marketing, sales, finance, run their data warehouse, I think that that's the right thing to do. And let's see. I think that anybody that stands in front of you and says that you're going to replace your data warehouse with big data, I would immediately find somebody else to talk with, because that person doesn't understand what they're talking about. So if I had three pieces of advice, that's what I would give you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think people would take that advice gladly. Data warehouses are going to stay there forever. In fact, a couple of organizations I've worked with have made zillions out of that implementation of a data warehouse and whatnot. So let's not go there. Okay,
Yep.
very quickly, before I come to the question and answers, guys, the audience, more than 20 of you guys there still. This is your time to ask question. I'm getting on to question answer session, and I'm going to pick your questions up one by one. So let's go to YouTube and Facebook and see what we've got there. Let's start. My good old friend Evangelo Kulos, and he says, "Good to see you, Shelly. Hi, Angelo. How are you?" And he's got a question. He says, "Be interested to know Bill's view on what the most pressing developments he sees today in the world of BI and analytics."
Well, what I see, the greatest promise is starting to be able to integrate unstructured textual data with your operational data. That there is a world of opportunity waiting there. And I'll tell you what, you want to get rich, that's the place to look to get rich.
Okay, that's a very good comment. Next, we go off to Facebook, and on Facebook, we've got Nidhi Agarwal. Hi, Nidhi, how are you doing? She's saying, "Is it good for utility-based companies to move to cloud? Please brief."
I think there's every reason to move to the cloud. Economic reasons, technical reasons, organizational reasons. The answer is absolutely yes. I think that's a very good idea.
Okay, perfect. Next comment is from Dharmendra Patel, and he says, "Hello, watching from Vadodara in India." Hi, Dharmendra, how are you? Next is Samuel Victor. He's a regular on the show, and he says, first of all, hi, Samuel, how are you? First of all, thank you so much. I had my question on data warehouse versus data lake answered. We've already taken that question up, so it's good. And he's come back with another question, and he says, "I have one underlying question for the future. What is the impact that blockchain will have on data warehousing? Any insight?" Bill?
I'm going to give you an answer that you probably aren't going to like, but you're the one that asked the question. And if you ask the question, then I'm going to give you an honest answer. The truth of the matter is that IBM Corporation, as far as I can tell, has never understood data warehouse. They have not supported it. They have not understood it. And I don't think that blockchain has any great play in data warehousing. I could be wrong about that, but so far it remains to be seen. And so I'm sorry if you work for IBM. I don't mean, but you asked a question, and I'll tell you an honest answer.
Perfect. Samuel, hopefully you've got your answer. Next comment is from Angelo. Angelo says, thanks, buddy. So that was good. Let's move on to LinkedIn, and we've got a few questions there on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, there is no integration with LinkedIn so far, so I'll have to read the question for you, Bill.
Okay.
So the first comment is from Drew Malden. And hi, Drew, how are you? He's a speaker and thought leader, digital strategist. And he says, I love the series. Thanks for doing this. Thank you, Drew. The next question is from Shankara Naikar. And the question is that a question? It's a big comment. Okay, I'll ignore that because I can't read. It's too long a question. It's not a question. It's some comment. The next question is from Ala Mahjoub. He's a data management senior expert with extensive expertise in enterprise architecture. And he says, what is the best practice to ensure the data security and privacy when it comes to storing of data in the data lake?
In a data lake, well, let me tell you, in a data lake, it's kind of like swimming with sharks. How do you swim with sharks? You swim with sharks carefully. You constantly look out for being bitten. Data lakes are an afterthought to big data, and there's very little architectural definition for them. If you're interested in some ideas on the infrastructure that you need for data lakes, when data lakes first came out, I wrote a book on data lakes, and in that book, I suggest the larger infrastructure that makes sense.
Okay. The next comment is from Shubhanshu Shekhar. Hi, Shubhanshu. How are you? Hope you're well. He says, great conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Shubhanshu. The next question is from Ala Mahjoub, and he says, what about the data security if data is moved to public cloud?
You're going to have to take that issue up with the provider for the public clouds. Now, I know that that's a very sensitive issue. I know that that's a very sensitive issue. Some people just don't trust their data on a public cloud, and I as far as I can tell, the people that run the public clouds are honest people. I don't know. I'm not aware of any provider for the public cloud that isn't honest. They may be out there, but I don't know who they would be. So I think that the people that are that provide the public cloud are basically honest people. So I think the threat to the public cloud doesn't come from the provider, but from the hackers that would want to get into the public cloud. One solution, and it's not a very good solution, there's a lot of downside to it, but you can always de-identify your data before you put it on the cloud. Now, I hesitate to say that that's a good solution for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of downside to de-identifying and then having to re-identify data. But if you're really worried about the security of your data, you can always do that. But that's kind of like having a headache and having the doctor open up your stomach because your head doesn't feel good. That's an extreme measure to go to, but can it be done? Actually, it can be done and it works, but you need to look into the overhead and the downside of doing it.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, Bill. And I think, Allah, you've got the answer to that question. The next question is from Afghan S. Yashaullah. Hi, Afghan. How are you? He's asking about disaster recovery And is hybrid data access possible locally and cloud?
I'm sorry, Shelley. Can you repeat that question again?
He's asking about disaster recovery, DR,
Yeah.
and how do you take that? And is hybrid data access possible both locally and on the cloud?
You're going to have to talk to the provider on the cloud to answer that question. That's really more of a technological question, and that is entirely dependent on the provider. I cannot sit up here and speak for the people that provide those services.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for the answer. And Afghan, I think you need to go to the service provider for that. One thing I can't let you go without asking in the current scenario.
Sure.
And my friend Angelo prompted me on that, and let me just put that question on. And that is, in the COVID world, many working from home, there is an increase use of video and streaming and data exchange. 2 questions, please. Number 1, how do we better capture, manage this in the world of data? And what should we do better leveraging this data?
If I had a good answer for you, I would probably be a very rich person today. So I'm not sure how good of an answer I have for you. But when we take a look at the world of text, there's actually a whole world open up there that can, in terms of conversations like this. For example, Zoom has got a wonderful capability of capturing conversations, and then we turn Zoom conversations into text. So can it be captured and can it be managed? Absolutely, yes, it can. What can we do to leverage it? Let me tell you, the secret to leveraging anything is asking the question, how do I make money on it? And once you understand how you can make money on it, then you will start to be on the path to understanding how to leverage the data. So capturing and managing it, there's a lot of things that we can do, and they're actually pretty exciting and new. I suggest that 2 weeks from now, when we have our session on textual analytics, that you listen in, and you'll hear some things that I think you may find surprising and pleasing. I don't. People don't like to be surprised with negative things. I promise to surprise you with positive things. I'll move your cheese to where it's easier to get to and where you can have more cheese.
Okay, so Angelo said, show me the money. That's what he was looking at, and that's great, Angelo. Thank you. And he says, great answer. Thanks. I must say, all my life, while I've been doing data warehousing analytics, I always say nothing succeeds like success. And if you do not have a success story to support something, it doesn't work. And I give you a classic example. I used to tell people when they were talking about big data all the time, I said, I remember long time ago, of course, when I started my career at the same time, there was a story around beards and nappies, and that kicked off the data mining revolution out of data warehouse into data mining. And if that story wasn't there, I doubt that people would be talking about data mining in those early days. But that success story actually became so relevant, and everyone wanted to give their opinion. And why would someone buy a nappy because they're buying a beer, or why a beer and a nappy, and everyone had their own reasoning for that. A success story is very, very important, and that's where I say nothing succeeds like success. And I think that's what you mentioned as well, Bill.
Yep.
Angelo just turned around and said, I'll be there with the bells on that day. So, okay. I've got 2 more questions before 2 more comments. One is from Nidhi Agarwal, and she says, thanks for taking my question. See you on 14th May. Hope no sessions before. If there are, I would be waiting for the same. So that's another one. And final question is on LinkedIn, and I'll make it final, from Prateek Sharma. And he says, Prateek is an enterprise architect, digital transformer, and business development at ASX. That's what I could read. He says, what do you suggest? Data warehouse should be used as source of truth for AI and ML applications?
Uh, Boy, that's actually a really interesting question because when it comes to data science and AI, for whatever reason, the data scientists have not looked at data warehouse, and I find that to be a really strange thing. I am going to do some research into why that happened, but I think that the data scientist people are more of a mind to be academic, looking for algorithms. And the data warehouse people are more of the clerical people looking just to get the data to where it can be used. But I think that in the future, somebody in data science is going to discover the data warehouse, and they're going to find out that, oh my gosh, there's this source of data that's already vetted, already clean, already ready to be used, and waiting there for them. But it's to me very strange. Somebody once told me, I used to have a number of friends of mine at SAS Institute in Cary, North Carolina. And they said, Bill, we go to school to learn all of this statistics and data science, and then we spend 95% of our job cleaning data. And
Yep.
he says, we should be data garbage men, not data scientists. And the reality is that's reality. And so I suspect that in the future, some smart data scientist is going to discover data warehouses and discover that the data that they're looking for, or much of the data they're looking for, has been there waiting for them all the time. But it is simply true that your data scientists, for whatever reason, don't really do much of anything with a data warehouse. And that's a shame. That's an opportunity that's lost.
So can I add there, Bill? I think maybe you've not seen the right organizations who've actually done that, but all the organizations I've worked source
Yep.
data from the data warehouse. The data scientists focus mostly on the data warehouse data because that's clean. All my data scientists, well, I call them, for the last 20 years, people have been changing their titles, and I will call them analysts. My analysts, whether data scientists or data engineer or whatever you call them, focused on data warehouse data because it was clean. The only problem that we had was because the data from the data warehouse, the moment you start sending a high-end algorithm to it, it will bring the data warehouse down because the data loading process will fail. So to solve that problem, all the organizations I've worked in, we have two boxes. And I would say, I'd said that a couple of times, saying, I don't care whether my data gets updated every day. It can be
Mhm.
2 days. So you keep your data warehouse updated on daily basis so that you can run your reports, but give me a feed to the data almost every next day so that I can have an up-to-date system. On a Friday I should have, or on a Monday I should have data up until Friday or Saturday at least.
Yep.
And then every 2 days I can fill, because that is where my analytics and my modeling would be able to use the data warehouse clean data to get some outcome out of, or find some solutions. And that really worked, because all of that work that we did, and some of my guys are on the call as well, and they've worked on the data warehouse clean data, and it's a brilliant success story. Every time you do that, it is successful.
And you know something, Shalindra, I'm really glad to hear you say that, but I've not seen that. The organizations that I've talked with, the data scientists sit over here, and analysts sit over here, the data warehouse people sit over here, and they don't talk. There's like a wall between them, and that's not right. But on the other hand, trying to talk to these people, you're trying to move their cheese, and people hate having their cheese moved.
No, I totally agree with you. But all the organizations I've worked with, and even at Accenture when I was doing consulting, it was utilizing the clean data warehouse data, and I think that's where I owe a lot to you, because if that revolution didn't start with the data warehousing, analytics wouldn't have happened. Because in my view, analytics is not reporting; it's about doing something with the data to find out outcomes so that business can execute on it. It's not about creating a report. And if data warehouse journey wasn't started at the time when you started it, I would have done nothing. And to be honest, all of the work that I've done and success stories that I've got are only based out of the fact that we use the clean data from data warehouse, and at times mix it with the unstructured data lying outside of the world to bring it in and create some outcomes out of it. There are few success stories. I think it's missing in the US, but in Australia here down under, we've done that umpteen number of times.
And that's in that regard, you're well ahead of the United States. But anyway, I think it's a matter of time before these two groups do start to talk to each other. But right now, at least the ones I see, they might as well. One of them live in Australia and one of them live in San Diego. They don't talk. They don't communicate. They're in a different world.
So I think what you're seeing is, if that's true, you should actually show them this interview and tell them that there are people in Australia or even in India, I know, who are doing exactly what you just said,
Yep.
and making millions of dollars for the organizations, signed off by the CFO. I'm not faking it.
Okay.
So when it gets signed off by the CFO, that's your money.
Yep.
It's stable, right? Okay. I've got one more question. It's from one of my team members. Would like to take that. Vineet Dhawan. He's saying, what's your view, pros and cons of engineered systems and commodity hardware for on-prem big data ecosystem? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I'm trying to think of a way to answer it politely. The big data people have not done a good job with wanting to work with or coexist with anybody else. They really haven't. They came into the world. Cloudera got lots of financial backing and money, and they thought that they were going to rewrite the rules for everything. And as a consequence, they have found or are finding out today that indeed they're not going to be rewriting the rules for everything. And it's been a bitter experience for them. The problem is that the Hadoop people and the big data people simply they don't want to hear any of this stuff. And so whenever I hear about a big data project, I think, oh my gosh, here we go again. This one, the likelihood of success is very small.
Okay, thank you. One more question. What solution do you recommend for DMP solution? By Vineet Dhawan as well.
D&B Solutions?
DMP.
DMP. I hate to tell you this, I'm not familiar with the term DMP.
It is direct marketing solutions.
Oh, direct marketing solutions. Well, I think that's an excellent lead in into what we're going to talk about on the the 14th. So I can tell you there's a book you might enjoy. It's called Hearing the Voice of the Customer. And you might want to look in that book if you're interested in marketing.
Okay, perfect. So, Bill, thank you for your time. We're on the hour, and I know it's midnight there now, but thank you very much for taking time out for Asia and people in Asia who can actually listen to you. It's great having you on the show. My pleasure and a dream come true to have you on the show. I would say we are doing what we're doing because you started a revolution once upon a time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too. I'll speak to you later. So, guys, that was BIll Inmon, Father of DataWarehouse. He will be back on 14th of May at 3 p.m. AEST and 10:30 a.m. IST and 1 p.m. SGT. So please do sign in then. Two comments. One for Pratik Sharma. Pratik, you want to know more about data science stories? We've got a series called Women in Data Science, which I run every fortnight, every alternate Thursday. So join in next week. We've got three ladies who were leaders in data science who are going to talk about data science and how they're using. And I'll put this question to them as well: that are they using Data Warehouse for their data science activities? And there was a message from Nidhi. Nidhi, we will be on next week again at 3 p.m. So please join in, and that will be Women in Data Science. Guys, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you all with so many questions for Bill, and I am very, very excited. This is all about data. Thank you very much, and stay safe, stay indoors. We still have to take care of ourselves because COVID is on. So take care. Bye now. Speak soon.